Tonight, we drift into a quieter world where two travelers chant their way through a dark forest, where a monstrous turnip changes a soldier's fate, where three princesses wait in an enchanted mountain, where an ungrateful son bears a living toad, and where lazy Harry loses his honey in a single stroke. So close your eyes and let the stories carry you far away into the quiet of the night. Lazy Harry. Harry was a lazy fellow, and though his one task in life was as simple as leading his goat to pasture each morning, he grumbled at the thought of it whenever the day's labor was done. He would sit upon the doorstep, rub his weary eyes, and murmur to himself in a voice that scarcely disguised his disgust. A heavy burden indeed to walk a goat to the field day after day, from spring until late autumn. If only I could lie down and sleep for an hour or two, then perhaps the world would seem less grinding. But no, I must keep my eyes open, or the foolish creature will nibble the young sapling squeeze through a gap in the hedge and find its way into some rich man's garden, or else run off into the woods and be lost altogether. Where is a man to find rest or peace of his life with such business to mind? He seated himself upon a low stone, folded his hands, and let his thoughts circle round and round like crows in the sky. For a long while, his thinking brought him no comfort. His mind wandered and fell back into the same list of complaints. At last, as sometimes happens when one sits still too long and lets the wind settle in the trees, his eyes seemed to clear as though scales had slipped from them. I know what I will do, he cried out suddenly, as a man who has found a key at the bottom of his pocket. I will marry Fat Trina, for she too keeps a goat. If her goat and my goat are driven together, the trouble will be doubled for one pair of hands, and thus halved for me. Then I shall be free of this daily burden. With that, Harry rose, set his reluctant legs in motion, and went straight across the lane, for her parents lived no farther than the next house, and asked for the hand of Fat Trina. He praised her in few words. She was diligent, he said, and virtuous, which was true enough, so far as laziness admits the existence of virtues in others. Her parents, who liked nothing better than to see plain folk make plain bargains, thought but little, and quickly agreed. Birds of a feather flock together, they observed with a nod, and so the match was made. Fat Trina became Harry's wife, and the two of them began to lead out both goats each morning. Harry found himself with a lighter life and more leisure than before. Now his only toil was the maintenance of his own idleness. He would go out with Trina upon occasion, but only to show that he had been diligent. Then he would say with a complacent air, "Do this, but that I might afterwards enjoy rest all the more. Otherwise, one loses the taste of it." Trina, for her part, proved no less fond of ease than her husband. She would stretch upon the bed after the goats were fed and sigh with content, for she had discovered that there are many kinds of work afoot and many ways to put them off. "Dear Harry," said she one day as they lay together beneath the eaves after another long morning of little work, "why should we continue to make our lives so toilsome when there is no need? Why spoil the best days of our youth with the bleating of 2 goats that wake us at dawn? Better it were to give these creatures to our neighbor, who will gladly take them, and in return he will give us a beehive. We shall place the hive in a sunny corner behind the house. Bees, you see, do not require driving to the field, nor watching by the hour. They fly forth on their errands, and always find their way home. And they bring us honey, without the bother of leading or coaxing." "You speak like a sensible woman," replied Harry, whose thoughts were never cleverer than when they promised him less work. "Let us put your notion to deed without delay. Honey tastes sweeter than goat's milk keeps longer, and best of all, it costs us less trouble." The neighbor, who was a man of simple commerce and liked the exchange of beasts for useful things, took the goats and gladly handed over a beehive. The bees began their work at dawn and labored until late twilight. They flew in and out, up and down, and before the year had waned, the hive was full and heavy with the most beautiful honey. In the autumn, when leaves fell and the wind took to sighing through the chimneys, Harry lifted from the hive a whole pitcher filled to the brim with golden sweetness. They placed this pitcher upon a shelf fixed to the wall of their bedchamber, for they feared that some passing hand might be tempted by such treasure, or that mischievous mice would find their way to it. Trina, wary in her sloth, as any sentry, brought an honest hazel stick and set it beside the bed, so that with little movement she might reach out and drive away any uninvited pilferers. Lazy Harry loved nothing more than to linger beneath the feathers until the sun had climbed high. He who rises early, he would say with a yawn, wastes his substance. One morning, while he still lay buried among the pillows in the full light of day, for he regarded noon as early and dawn as an affront, he peered over the quilt and said to his wife with a small voice of envy, "Women are fond of sweet things, and thou art always stealing tastes from the honey when I am absent. It would be better for our store if we exchanged it for a goose with a gosling before thou eatest it all away." "But not so fast," answered Trina, who loved the idea of having something to care for, as long as caring cost little else. "How can we tend young geese when we have none to mind them? Am I to rise at all hours and fuss for their sake? I shall not spin my days away on useless tasks. Think you? Harry retorted, stretching one foot from under the cover, that a child would mind. Geese for us children, now days do as pleaseth them. They fancy themselves wiser than their elders. Have you not heard of the lad who was sent to fetch the cow and chased 3 blackbirds instead? No, I say, wait till we have a child who will do our bidding. Oh, cried Trina, her temper quick as a spark, despite her inclination for ease. If that child will not obey, I will thrash him with more blows than I can count. She seized the stout hazel stick which stood by the bed, as if to practice the blow. Full of zeal, she raised her arm to strike the phantom, disobedient one, in the air. But mischance, which often attends the schemes of those who would have life made easier by another's task, took a hand. The stick slipped from her fingers, and with a heavy stroke smote the very pitcher upon the shelf above the bed. The pot struck the wall, toppled, and fell to the floor in 1,000 fragments. The rich honey, which had shone like a captured sun, streamed over the floorboards and ran like a small river under the bed. There lie the goose and the little gosling, said lazy Harry, chuckling at the sweep of fate, as though it were a jest brought to his door. They need no looking after, but it is lucky the pitcher did not fall upon my head. He peered at the glitter left among the broken shards. Some of the honey still clung in a piece. With the appetite of a man who finds his comforts increased without labor, he stretched a hand and licked at the remainder. Let us at least enjoy the remnants, he said, with a careless gaiety. After such a fright, we may rest a little longer. What matters if we arise? But an hour later, the day is long enough, I answered Trina, wiping a drop of honey with the corner of her apron and trying to make light of the mishap. We shall come to the end of it in due time. Dost thou remember the snail that was bidden to a wedding and set out with all the best will, but arrived only at the christening? It fell over the garden fence and said, "Speed does no good." And so the two who had sought to spare themselves work through bargains and bright ideas found that ease has a way of tripling mischief, and that comfort won by avoidance sometimes loses itself in the very hour it hoped to keep. The shoes that were danced to pieces. There was once upon a time a king who had 12 daughters, each one more beautiful than the other. They all slept together in one chamber, in which their beds stood side by side, and every night when they were in them, the king locked the door and bolted it. But in the morning, When he unlocked the door, he saw that their shoes were worn out with dancing, and no one could find out how that had come to pass. Then the king caused it to be proclaimed that whosoever could discover where they danced at night should choose one of them for his wife and be king after his death. But that whosoever came forward and had not discovered it within 3 days and nights should have forfeited his life. It was not long before a king's son presented himself and offered to undertake the enterprise. He was well received, and in the evening was led into a room adjoining the princess's sleeping chamber. His bed was placed there, and he was to observe where they went and danced, and in order that they might do nothing secretly or go away to some other place. The door of their room was left open, but the eyelids of the prince grew heavy as lead, and he fell asleep. And when he awoke in the morning, all 12 had been to the dance, for their shoes were standing there with holes in the soles. On the 2nd and 3rd nights, it fell out just the same, and then his head was struck off without mercy. Many others came after this and undertook the enterprise, but all forfeited their lives. Now it came to pass that a poor soldier who had a wound and could serve no longer found himself on the road to the town where the king lived. There he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. "I hardly know myself," answered he, and added in jest, "I had half a mind to discover where the princesses danced their shoes into holes and thus become king." "That is not so difficult," said the old woman. "You must not drink the wine which will be brought to you at night, and must pretend to be sound asleep." With that, she gave him a little cloak and said, "If you put on that, you will be invisible, and then you can steal after the 12. When the soldier had received this good advice, he went into the thing in earnest, took heart, went to the king, and announced himself as a suitor. He was as well received as the others, and royal garments were put upon him. He was conducted that evening at bedtime into the antechamber, and as he was about to go to bed, the eldest came and brought him a cup of wine, but he had tied a sponge under his chin and let the wine run down into it without drinking a drop. Then he lay down, and when he had lain a while, he began to snore as if in the deepest sleep. The 12 princesses heard that and laughed, and the eldest said he too might as well have saved his life. With that they got up, opened wardrobes, presses, cupboards, and brought out pretty dresses, dressed themselves before the mirrors sprang about, and rejoiced at the prospect of the dance. Only the youngest said, "I know not how it is. You are very happy, but I feel very strange. Some misfortune is certainly about to befall us." "Thou art a goose who art always frightened," said the eldest. "Hast thou forgotten how many kings' sons have already come here in vain? I had hardly any need to give the soldier a sleeping draught." In any case, the clown would not have awakened. When they were all ready, they looked carefully at the soldier, but he had closed his eyes and did not move or stir, so they felt themselves quite secure. The eldest then went to her bed and tapped it. It immediately sank into the earth, and one after the other, they descended through the opening, the eldest going first. The soldier, who had watched everything, tarried no longer, put on his little cloak, and went down last with the youngest. Halfway down the steps, he just trod a little on her dress. She was terrified at that, and cried out, "What is that? Who is pulling my dress?" "Don't be so silly," said the eldest. "You have caught it on a nail." Then they went all the way down, and when they were at the bottom, they were standing in a wonderfully pretty avenue of trees, all the leaves of which were of silver, and shone and glistened. The soldier thought, "I must carry a token away with me," and broke off a twig from one of them, on which the tree cracked with a loud report. The youngest cried out again, "Something is wrong. Did you hear the crack?" But the eldest said, "It is a gun fired for joy, because we have got rid of our prince so quickly." After that, they came into an avenue where all the leaves were of gold, and lastly into a third where they were of bright diamonds. He broke off a twig from each, which made such a crack each time that the youngest started back in terror, but the eldest still maintained that they were salutes. They went on and came to a great lake, whereon stood 12 little boats, and in every boat sat a handsome prince, all of whom were waiting for the 12, and each took one of them with him. But the soldier seated himself by the youngest. Then her prince said, "I can't tell why the boat is so much heavier today. I shall have to row with all my strength if I am to get it across." "What should cause that?" said the youngest. "But the warm weather, I feel very warm too." On the opposite side of the lake stood a splendid, brightly lit castle, from whence resounded the joyous music of trumpets and kettle drums. They rode over there, entered, and each prince danced with the girl he loved. But the soldier danced with them unseen, and when one of them had a cup of wine in her hand, he drank it up so that the cup was empty when she carried it to her mouth. The youngest was alarmed at this, but the eldest always made her be silent. They danced there till 3 o'clock in the morning, when all the shoes were danced into holes, and they were forced to leave off. The princes rowed them back again over the lake, and this time the soldier seated himself by the eldest. On the shore they took leave of their princes and promised to return the following night. When they reached the stairs, the soldier ran on in front and lay down in his bed. And when the 12 had come up slowly and wearily, he was already snoring so loudly that they could all hear him. And they said, "So far as he is concerned, we are safe." They took off their beautiful dresses, laid them away, put the worn-out shoes under the bed, and lay down. Next morning, the soldier was resolved not to speak, but to watch the wonderful goings-on, and again went with them. Then everything was done just as it had been done the first time, and each time they danced until their shoes were worn to pieces. But the third time, he took a cup away with him as a token. When the hour had arrived for him to give his answer, he took the 3 twigs and the cup and went to the king. But the 12 stood behind the door and listened for what he was going to say. When the king put the question, "Where have my 12 daughters danced their shoes to pieces in the night?" he answered, "In an underground castle with 12 princes," and related how it had come to pass and brought out the tokens. The king then summoned his daughters and asked them if the soldier had told the truth. And when they saw that they were betrayed, and that falsehood would be of no avail, they were obliged to confess all. Thereupon the king asked which of them he would have to wife. He answered, "I am no longer young, so give me the eldest." Then the wedding was celebrated on the selfsame day, and the kingdom was promised him after the king's death. But the princes were bewitched for as many days as they had danced nights with the 12. The turnip. Once upon a time there lived 2 brothers, both of whom had served bravely as soldiers in the wars. One brother, through fortune and cunning, had grown wealthy, dressed in fine clothes, and feasted at noble tables. The other, though equally valiant, returned from the field with little more than the coat on his back and the ache of hunger in his belly. For a long while he wandered in want, until at last he said to himself, "Better to try my hand at the earth than perish with an empty purse. If I cannot thrive as a soldier, perhaps the soil will show me mercy." So he laid aside his soldier's coat and took up the life of a humble farmer. He bought a small patch of land, poor in soil, but rich in hope. And there he dug, hoed, and sowed what little seed he could afford. Turnip seed, the food of the common folk. He tended the field with his own weary hands, and when the shoots broke through the soil, he felt his heart stir with a quiet joy. Among the many small turnips, one plant began to grow larger, rounder, and stronger than the rest. Day by day it swelled, as though it drank the very strength of the earth, until the man could scarce believe his eyes. It grew and grew, never ceasing, until it seemed that heaven itself had blessed it with enchantment. So wondrous was its size that folk from the neighboring fields whispered it was not a turnip at all, but the queen of turnips, for never before had such a marvel been seen, nor would such a marvel be seen again. At length, it became so vast that it filled an entire cart by itself, and 2 strong oxen strained at the yoke to pull its monstrous weight. The farmer stood before it, scratching his head in perplexity. What shall I do with such a thing if I sell it? What coin could possibly repay its wonder? If I eat it, I will gain no more nourishment than from a common turnip, and I would sooner burst than consume it whole. No, no. Perhaps the best fate for such a gift is to lay it before the king himself. He may smile upon my offering, and fortune may yet return to me. So with great care, he loaded the giant turnip onto a cart, yoked his oxen, and made his slow journey to the royal palace. When he entered the great hall and presented it, the courtiers gasped, and the king himself rose from his throne in astonishment. "What marvel is this?" cried the king. "Many strange wonders have crossed my sight, but never such a monster as this root. Tell me, from what seed did this spring? Or are you perhaps a child of fortune, a luck-born, and have stumbled upon this treasure by chance?" The farmer bowed low and answered humbly, "No, my lord, no fortune child am I. I am but a poor soldier who could no longer bear his poverty. I hung my soldier's coat upon a nail and turned my hands to the soil. I have a brother known to you who is wealthy and honored, yet I, because I have nothing, am forgotten by all." The king, hearing this, was moved with compassion. "Thy poverty shall trouble thee no more," said he. "For thy gift I will raise thee to equal thy rich brother." And so the king bestowed upon him lands and meadows, gold and cattle, until the poor man found himself richer than he had ever dreamed, his barns filled and his fields wide. Indeed, his fortune soon outshone that of his wealthy brother, who, upon hearing the tale, was consumed by envy. "Shall my beggarly brother become greater than I?" he muttered. "If he has won such riches with a single turnip, what fortune shall I not win if I bring the king treasures, more fitting gold and noble steeds?" So the rich brother gathered his finest horses and great bags of gold, and rode in splendor to the king. With a proud heart he laid them at the monarch's feet, certain he would receive a treasure beyond imagining. Yet the king, smiling, said, "Rare indeed is your gift, but I have nothing rarer, nothing more wondrous to bestow in return than the great turnip your brother gave me. This, then, shall be your reward." And he ordered the monstrous turnip to be loaded into a cart and sent home with the rich man. When the proud brother beheld the turnip at his gate, rage swelled in his heart, and he knew not on whom to vent his fury. Dark thoughts crept into his mind, whispering of blood and betrayal, until at last he resolved to kill his brother and claim his fortune. I hired wicked men to do the deed, and then went to his brother with a feigned smile. Brother, said he, I know of a hidden treasure buried deep in the wood. Come with me, and we shall dig it up together and divide it fairly. The honest brother, suspecting no ill, agreed, and followed him into the forest. There the murderers fell upon him, bound his hands, and made ready to hang him from a tree. Yet even as they set the rope about his neck, the sound of singing and the clatter of hooves came through the forest. Fear seized the villains, and in haste they thrust the poor man head first into a sack, tied it fast, hung it upon a high branch, and fled. The prisoner struggled in the sack until at last he tore a small hole through which he could thrust his head. And lo, along the path rode a young student, a merry fellow, singing a bright song as he journeyed. The man in the sack called down, "Good day. You come at a lucky hour." The student started, looked about, and cried, "Who calls me?" "Raise your eyes," said the voice, "for I sit aloft in the sack of wisdom. In a short while I have learned wondrous things, more than any school can teach. I know the stars and their courses, the winds and their paths, the secrets of herbs, the healing of sickness, the voices of birds, and the virtues of stones. Soon I shall descend wiser than all men on earth. If you would enter the sack, you too would feel wisdom pour into your soul." The student, astonished and eager, said, "Blessed be the hour I have found thee. Let me climb in. I bet that I too may taste such wisdom." The man in the sack replied, as though unwilling, "Not yet, not yet. A little while. I must remain, for one last secret waits to be learned. But if you will wait and promise me good words, perhaps I shall let you in." The student grew impatient. "I cannot wait, for my thirst for knowledge burns too strongly. Let me in at once." At last the man pretended to yield. "Very well. Lower the sack by the rope, and when I step out, you may climb in." The student gladly untied the sack and set the man free. Then he cried, "Now draw me up at once, so that wisdom may flow into me." "Halt," said the other. With a cunning grin, he seized the student, thrust him head first into the sack, tied it tightly, and hauled him high into the tree. There he swung in the air, while the man below laughed and said, "How fares it with you, my wise friend? Already wisdom flows into you, and by the time you come down, You will have learnt much indeed. Remain there in silence until knowledge ripens. With that, he mounted the student's horse, took up his song, and rode merrily away. Only an hour later did he send someone to release the poor student from the sack of wisdom. The white bride and the black one. Once upon a time, a woman went wandering with her daughter and her stepdaughter across the wide open fields where the grass was high and the sun beat down. They were cutting fodder for the cattle when along the dusty path there came a poor man walking slowly towards them. His clothes were patched, his sandals worn thin, and his face was lined with hunger and hardship. Yet it was no beggar they beheld, but the Lord himself, who had chosen to walk upon the earth in humble form. He greeted them and said gently, "Which is the way into the village?" The mother frowned and would not look at him. "If you wish to know," she answered sharply, "seek it for yourself." Her daughter tossed her head with disdain and added cruelly, "If you are afraid of losing your way, then hire a guide, for I will not show you." But the stepdaughter, whose heart was pure, laid down her bundle of grass, came forward and said with kindness, "Poor man, I will take you there. Come with me, and I shall guide you." Then the Lord turned his face away in anger from the hard-hearted mother and her daughter, and he said, "As black as night, and as hideous as sin, so shall ye both become." And instantly their faces darkened, and their beauty withered, until they were ugly beyond words. But to the stepdaughter he was gracious. He walked beside her, and when they were near the village, he blessed her, saying, "Choose 3 things for thyself, and I shall grant them to thee." The maiden bowed low and spoke, "First, I wish to be fair and beautiful, shining like the sun at dawn." At once her skin gleamed white, and her face became radiant as morning light. Secondly, she said, "I wish for a purse of money that shall never be empty." The Lord placed such a purse in her hands, heavy with gold. And third, said the girl softly, "I wish that when my time comes, I may dwell in the eternal kingdom of heaven." And this also he promised her. Then the Lord vanished from her sight, and the maiden went home. When the stepmother and her daughter beheld her beauty and her blessings, envy, like poison, grew in their hearts. They plotted day and night how they might harm her. Now the maiden had a brother named Regener, a good and faithful man who loved her dearly. She told him all that had happened. One day he said to her, "Dearest sister, I would paint thy likeness, that I may behold thee always before my eyes, for my love for thee is so great." The maiden agreed, but warned him, "Let no one else see it, I beseech thee." So Regener painted her portrait, fair as the sun, and gentle as dawn, and hung it in his chamber. But Reginer was no common man. He served as coachman in the palace of the king. Each day he gazed upon the painting and gave thanks to God for such a sister. Now it so happened that the queen of the land had lately died, and she had been so fair that no one could compare with her. The king grieved bitterly, for he thought none could ever match her beauty. Yet the courtiers noticed that Reginer gazed daily at a portrait, and jealousy moved them to whisper to the king. The king commanded that the picture be brought before him. When he beheld it, he started in wonder, for it was like his lost queen, in every feature, only fairer still. A fire of love awoke in his heart. He summoned Reginer and asked, "Whose likeness is this?" Reginer replied truthfully, "It is my sister." Then the king said, "No woman, but she shall be my bride. Take carriage horses and garments of cloth of gold, and fetch her to me." So Reginer rode forth. The maiden rejoiced at her fortune, but the black daughter was filled with malice. She cried to her mother, "What good are all your arts if you cannot win such luck for me?" "Be still," said the witch mother. "I shall turn it to thy gain." By wicked magic, she clouded Reginer's eyes until he was half blind, and she bewitched the white maiden's ears until she was half deaf. Thus they set out the bride in royal garments, the black daughter and her mother beside her, and Reginer upon the coachman's seat. As they journeyed, Reginer sang out in loving tones, "Cover thee well, my sister, dear, that the rain may not wet thee, that the wind may not soil thee with dust, that thou mayest be fair and bright when thou standest before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" The old witch answered slyly, "He bids thee give thy golden robe to thy sister." So the maiden obeyed, and the black daughter arrayed herself in the shining gown, while the true bride was given only a ragged gray smock. Again Reginer called the same words, and again the maiden asked. The old witch lied, saying, "He bids thee give thy golden hood to thy sister." So the bride gave it, and her hair was left uncovered to the wind. A third time Reginer sang, and the stepmother said, "He bids thee lean from the carriage and look forth." But they were crossing a bridge over deep water. As soon as the maiden leaned out, the stepmother and her daughter pushed her over. She fell, and the waters closed above her. Yet in that very moment, a snow-white duck rose from the depths and floated down the stream. Reginer, half-blind, saw nothing amiss and drove on to the palace where the black daughter was presented as his sister. But when the king beheld her ugliness, he raged with fury. Yet the witch so bewitched him with cunning words and false enchantments that he took the black maiden to wife, and Reginer was cast into a pit filled with serpents and adders. Now listen. One evening, as the false bride sat on the king's knee, a white duck swam up the kitchen gutter. It spoke to the kitchen boy, "Boy, kindle me a fire that I may warm my feathers." The boy obeyed. The duck sat by the hearth, shook her feathers, and asked, "What is my brother, Regener, doing?" "He lies imprisoned in the pit of snakes," answered the boy. "And what is the Black Witch doing?" "She is seated with the king and loved by him," said the boy. "God have mercy on him," sighed the duck and swam away. The next night she came again, and the third night as well, asking the same questions. At last the boy told the king. The king resolved to see for himself. On the third night, he hid by the hearth. When the duck came and asked her questions, he drew his sword and cut off her head. Instantly, the white duck was gone, and there stood before him a maiden of surpassing beauty, fair as the picture painted by Regener. The king rejoiced, clothed her in splendid garments, and she told him all that had befallen her, the treachery of her stepmother, the falsehood of the black maiden, and her own enchantment. Her first plea was for her brother to be freed. The king granted it at once, and Regener was lifted from the pit weak but alive. Then the king summoned the witch and her daughter and asked, "What punishment does she deserve? Who betrays the innocent, casts her into water, and steals her place?" The witch, blinded by her own malice, replied, "Such a one should be stripped, thrust into a barrel, set with nails, and dragged by a horse over the wide world. So shall it be," said the king. And it was done to the witch and her daughter. But the fair maiden was made. Queen and Regener was richly rewarded and raised to high honor. And thus virtue was crowned, and wickedness met its rightful end. The three black princesses in the far-away lands of East India. Calamity befell the people, for a cruel enemy had encircled the city and swore he would not depart until he had wrested from them 600 bright silver dollars. Fear spread through every house and every hearth, until at last the townsfolk in their distress sent heralds, beating drums through every street and market. The proclamation rang out, "Whosoever shall procure the demanded ransom shall be raised above all others, and made burgomaster of this town." Now in that place lived a poor fisherman, who daily cast his nets upon the wide lake. He had little wealth, but a single son, his faithful companion on the water. Misfortune came swiftly, for the enemy seized the boy, carried him off, and mocking the father's sorrow, placed $600 in his hand in exchange for the lad. With heavy heart, but firm resolve, the fisherman brought the ransom to the town's great men. The enemy, satisfied, lifted their siege and vanished over the hills. And so, according to their own decree, the townsfolk set the fisherman in the high seat of burgomaster, but they also commanded with iron law that whosoever addressed him, without saying, Mr. Burgomaster, should surely die upon the gallows. Meanwhile, the fisherman's son, by fortune or fate, escaped from his captors. Wandering long and far, he came at last to a wild forest upon a lofty mountain. There, before his very eyes, the mountain opened as though by sorcery, and within he beheld a grand enchanted castle. The halls were vast and solemn, and every table, every chair, every bench was hung in deepest black. Presently, 3 young princesses appeared, their gowns also of mourning, black, their faces pale, for a small touch of white upon each cheek. They spoke to him kindly, saying, Be not afraid, stranger. We mean thee no harm. Indeed, thou alone canst deliver us from this spell. The youth, eager and bold of heart, answered, Gladly would I aid you if I but knew the way. Then they revealed their strange command. For 1 full year thou must dwell with us, speaking not a word to us, nor gazing upon us with thine eyes. Yet whatsoever thou shalt desire, only ask, and if it be within our power, we shall grant it. So he remained in that gloomy castle for many days. At last, longing welled up in him to see once more his father. The maidens granted his wish. Go, then, said they, but take with thee this purse, which is ever full of money, and this coat, which is no common garment. Yet mark well, within 1 week thou must return. No sooner had he clothed himself than he was borne through the air and set down in East India. Yet when he sought his father at the humble fisherman's hut, it was gone, and the people told him sternly, Call him not fisherman, or the gallows shall be thy reward. At last he found his father, now splendid in burgomaster's robes, and cried, Father fisherman, how camest thou here in such state? Alarmed, the man whispered, Child, speak not so. If the town's rulers hear it, thou wilt hang. But the boy persisted, unheeding, until indeed he was dragged before the judgment seat and condemned to die. Upon the gallows, he begged, Grant me but one request. Let me go once more to the old hut of the fisherman. They consented, and he returned, donned his ragged smock, and came before the town once more, saying, Look upon me. Am I not the son of the poor fisherman, who in this very garb earned bread for his parents? Then his father's eyes were opened, and he knew him again, and fell upon his neck, begging forgiveness, and took him home with joy. There the son told all that had befallen him. The mountain that opened the black-draped castle, the three princesses, bound by a dreadful spell. His mother, trembling, warned him, "Such enchantments are not to be trifled with. Take holy, boil it, and sprinkle it upon their faces, so shalt thou break their darkness." So the son returned, but fear gnawed at him. At night, while the maidens slept, he crept to their chamber and sprinkled the boiling water upon them. At once, their faces turned half white, half black. Then the three princesses leapt up their eyes, burning with fury. "Accursed one," they cried. "Because of thee, our deliverance is lost forever. No man born upon the earth, nor ever to be born, may set us free. Our three brothers, bound by 7 chains, shall come, and they shall tear thee limb from limb." Then arose a dreadful shrieking throughout the castle. In terror, the youth fled, leaping from a high window, and in his fall, he broke his leg. Behind him, the castle shook, groaned, and sank into the earth. The mountain closed once more, and none could ever tell where that enchanted place had stood. The beam. There was once in days, not near our own, a man who called himself wise in secret arts. Some said he had wandered in dark forests where no birds sing others, that he had drunk of waters hidden under stone, and thereby learned the tongue of shadows. Be that as it may, he clothed himself in mystery, and wherever people gathered, he strode into their midst, carrying with him a staff carved with crooked signs, and a mantle that smelled faintly of smoke and bitter herbs. On one such day, he came into a market square where men and women pressed together, eager to see marvels that their own hands could never accomplish. He lifted his staff, muttered words none could rightly hear, and bade a servant bring forth a cock of burnished feathers. The bird strutted, proudly, crowed once, and then behold, beneath its claws, it raised up a beam of wood, as thick as a man's arm, and as long as a wagon. Yet it carried the heavy thing, as though it were nothing more than a reed cut from the riverbank. The people gaped and crossed themselves, for they thought it was surely sorcery of the highest kind. Mothers held their children close. Farmers rubbed their eyes, and old men shook their heads in wonder. Some whispered, "This man holds power over nature itself. He can make the impossible plain." But among them stood a maiden, fair and quiet, who that very morning had bent to gather herbs at the edge of a meadow. There, hidden among the grass, she had found a 4-leaved clover, a plant of such virtue that it grants the finder clear sight into all deceits and phantoms. She held it close in her bodice, and its unseen power brightened her gaze. So while the others marveled, the maiden's eyes pierced through the glamour. She saw that what the cock carried was no beam, no weighty timber, but a common stalk of straw, light as dust, and that the magician's murmurings were no more than empty breath. Then she lifted her voice, which was clear as a bell, ringing in the morning. You good people, have you no eyes? Do you not see? The cock bears not a beam of oak, but only a straw, such as the wind might blow across the road. Her words rang out over the square, and in that instant the spell cracked like thin ice. The illusion fell away, and the crowd saw with their own eyes the truth. Murmurs turned to cries of anger, and soon the people pressed upon the enchanter, railing at him for a cheat and deceiver. They seized his mantle, tore it, and drove him out with sticks and curses until he fled in disgrace, his head bent low. Yet as he slunk away, shame burned into fury, and fury hardened into spite. He muttered to himself, "This girl has shamed me before all eyes. But I am not yet undone. My time will come, and she shall rue the hour she spoke against me. I shall have my revenge, though I wait long for it." Time passed. The girl, being wise and good, grew dear to all in her village. At length, a suitor came, and her wedding day was set. The whole countryside rejoiced, for she was beloved, and her betrothal promised gladness. On the appointed morning, she was arrayed in bridal white, with flowers in her hair, and she walked in procession with kinsfolk and friends through the fields toward the little church that stood by a grove of linden trees. The sun shone and the bells began to ring, when suddenly their way was blocked by a stream swollen with rain. The water rushed swift and deep, and there was neither bridge nor plank. The company halted, unsure how to pass, but the bride, nimble and unafraid, gathered up her garments and stepped lightly down, meaning to wade through as best she could. No sooner had she set her feet in the stream than a mocking voice spoke close beside her ear. "Aha, where are thine eyes? Wise maiden, that thou takest this for water." She turned, and there beside her stood none other than the enchanter, his face twisted in cruel mirth. At his words, the spell fell upon her, and her sight was clouded. She looked again, and lo, she was not in a stream at all, but standing in the midst of a field thick with blue flax flowers. Their blossoms nodded around her like a wave of azure, and her white gown was lifted in vain, for no water ran there. The people behind her saw likewise, and bewilderment turned swiftly into laughter. They pointed and jeered. "See the wise one. See how she hikes her dress, as if to cross a brook, while she stands only among flowers." The sound of their mocking rolled over her like thunder. Her cheeks burned red, her heart faltered, and she fled away, pursued by ridicule and scorn. Thus, the enchanter's vengeance was fulfilled, though by trickery alone. And so the tale teaches he who unmasks deceit must be steadfast, for deceit will seek to return. Yet truth, though hidden for a season, shall outlast every shadow. The Maid of Brakel. Long ago, in the little town of Brakel, there lived a maiden whose heart was restless. Though her hands were quick at the spindle, and her song was sweet in the fields, she dreamed above all of one thing: to have a husband of her own, a man to sit beside her by the hearth when the winter winds howled, and to walk with her in summer meadows when the larks sang overhead. Yet no suitor came, and so her longing grew sharper with every passing year. Now, it so happened that at the foot of the hill called Hinnenberg, there stood a small but venerable chapel dedicated to Saint Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. Many a young woman had gone there with prayers whispered in secret, for Saint Anne was thought to be kindly toward maidens who sought good husbands. And so, one bright morning, the girl of Brakel, tied on her kerchief, slipped out unseen and made her way down the winding path to the chapel. When she entered, the place seemed empty. The candles before the altar burned with steady flames. The painted saints gazed solemnly from the windows, and the silence was so deep that she could hear her own breath. Believing herself quite alone, she knelt, folded her hands, and began to sing a little song that she herself had made. O holy saint, and grant me soon a man. You know him full well. By Sutmer Gate he does dwell. His hair is golden, his manner kind. To such a husband I'd be resigned. O holy Saint Anne, grant me soon a man. Her voice was soft at first, but soon it rang through the chapel like the note of a bird hidden in the rafters. She sang with such hope and longing that even the carved wooden figures seemed to lean closer to hear. But behind the altar, concealed by a curtain, stood the parish clerk. He had been setting the service books in order, and now listened with widening eyes. The more she sang, the more he frowned, until at last he could not keep silence. In a voice rough and gruff as a barking hound, he cried out, "Thou shalt not have him. Thou shalt not have him." The maiden started as if struck. Her heart leapt into her throat, for she believed not that a man had spoken, but that the little child Mary carved there beside her mother, Anne on the altar, had suddenly found voice. To think that such holy lips should scold her. Her cheeks flamed, her eyes flashed, and she shook her head in anger. "Fiddle-dee-dee," she cried. "What conceited airs! Hold your tongue, saucy child, and let your good mother speak instead." And with that, she rose, stamped her foot upon the chapel floor, and swept out in high dudgeon, leaving the clerk behind the altar, half frightened, half amused, and perhaps a little ashamed of his rough jest. The townsfolk of Brakel told the tale for many a year afterward, laughing at the boldness of the maiden who dared scold the Virgin's own image. Some said she did at last find her golden-haired husband for persistence and sharpness of tongue, often win where meekness fails. Others whispered that the clerk himself, who had played the trick later, came knocking at her door, and that the quarrel in the chapel was the first spark of a lifelong match. But whether true or not, the story clung to Brakel like ivy on a wall. And to this day, they speak of the girl who prayed to Saint Anne and who mistook a man's rough cry for the voice of a holy child. Knoist and his 3 sons, between the villages of Werel and Soest, there once lived a man named Knoist, a fellow not much known in the wide world, but who in his own narrow corner was remembered for the oddest of families. For Knoist had 3 sons, and never were there 3 such sons gathered under one roof. The eldest was blind, yet he boasted he could see further than any man, if only folk would listen to. The second was lame, dragging one leg behind him like a stubborn plowshare, though he swore he could outrun a hare if given the right chance. The third and youngest went about stark naked, never caring for coat or breeches, as though clothes were a burden too heavy for his shoulders. Thus it was said in jest that Knoist's house was poorer than a beggar's hut, though in truth it was richer in stories than many a lord's hall. One morning, when the sun hung pale behind drifting clouds, the 3 brothers set out together. They wandered across meadows and furrows until they came upon a hare crouched in the grass. The blind brother, who could not see a whit, raised his bow, drew the string to his ear, and loosed an arrow, so true that it struck the hare on the spot. The lame brother hobbled forward with surprising speed, laid his hands upon the creature, and seized it before it could twitch. The naked one, grinning from ear to ear, tucked the hare into his empty pocket, for he carried no garment but his own skin, and yet, somehow, the pocket was there. With this, they journeyed on until they reached a mighty broad lake, wider than 10 rivers, and still as a polished mirror. Floating upon the water were 3 boats. One boat was proud and swift, with sails spread wide to catch the wind. Another was battered and leaky, and even as they looked upon it down, it went swallowed by the lake. The third boat was a marvel indeed, for it had no bottom at all, only the sides and the prow, as if it were built for ghosts and not for men. And yet, without fear or second thought, the three brothers clambered into this bottomless boat and set forth, drifting as though borne on enchantment. They sailed for a long while until the lake gave way to a shore, and beyond that shore stretched a forest, vast and shadowy. Never had they seen such trees, trunks thick as towers, branches arching like the beams of a cathedral. Deeper and deeper they went until at the heart of the forest they found one tree, mightier than the rest, rising higher than a steeple and broader than a barn. And in that tree, lodged like a bird's nest, there was a chapel fashioned not of stone, but of timber and wonder. Within this chapel dwelt a sexton made wholly of beech wood, who rang the bell with wooden arms, though no sound came but the creak of his joints. Beside him stood a parson of boxwood, stiff and polished, with a face as solemn as any carved saint. These two strange figures dealt out holy water, not with font or cup, but with cudgels striking left and right, so that the drops flew like rain. Whoever came near was baptized with bruises as much as with blessings. The three brothers looked on in awe and in mirth, and the wooden parson lifted his staff and chanted in a voice that echoed through the chapel boughs. How truly happy is that one who from holy water can swiftly run. And whether it was a blessing or a warning, none could tell. Yet the blind man claimed he had seen it. The lame man swore he would dance from it, and the naked man said the blows could not harm him, for he wore no clothes to stain. So they laughed among themselves, and the forest rang with their laughter, and the tale, like the bottomless boat, carried them further on. Domestic servants. Two travelers met upon a narrow forest path where the shadows of the pines crossed one another like black ribbons. They halted, gazed, and spoke in the old sing-song manner of wayfarers. "Whither goest thou, stranger?" asked the first, raising his staff. "To Walpi," answered the second with a nod. "Then I to Walp and thou to Walp. So together we'll go step by step, road by road." And with that they fell into stride, their voices weaving like a chant. "Tell me, hast thou a man? For a house without a man is but a hearth without fire." "Ay, I have a man," said the traveler, "and his name is Cham. Cham, sayest thou? Then my man, Cham thy man, Cham. I to Walpi, thou to Walpi. So together we'll, staff by staff, song by song." They walked further, and the forest thickened. Again the first spoke, "Hast thou a child? For where there is a child, there is both burden and blessing. I have a child, indeed. He is called Wild. Then my child, Wild thy child, Wild. My man, Cham thy man, Cham. I to whalp, thou to whalp. So together we'll go heart by heart, mile by mile." Soon they came upon a clearing where the moon shone pale. There the question rose again, "Hast thou a cradle? Good fellow, for every wild must sleep, and every song must have its rest. A cradle have I, and Hippodadle is its name. Then my cradle, Hippodadle thy cradle, Hippodadle. My child, Wild thy child, Wild. My man, Cham thy man, Cham. I to whalp, thou to whalp. So together we'll go dream by dream, night by night." Their steps grew heavier, yet their chant flowed on. The first turned once more and asked, "Hast thou also a drudge? A faithful hand who bears the toil and bends beneath the yoke? For no house is kept without labor, and no road is trod without dust." "I have such a one," said the second, "and his name is Long from thy work do not budge. Ah, a name weighty as a millstone. Then my drudge, from thy work do not budge. Thy drudge, from thy work do not budge. My cradle, Hippodadle thy cradle, Hippodadle. My child, Wild thy child, Wild. My man, Cham thy man, Cham. I to whalpe, thou to whalpe. So together we'll go burden by burden, bond by bond." And as they went on, their voices grew louder, echoing against the dark trunks. So, to whalp we go, with man and child, with cradle and drudge, with name and song, with step and breath. I to whalpy, thou to whalpy, never alone, but always together. So together we'll go. Thus they walked until the night swallowed them, and only the rhythm of their chant remained, as though the forest itself carried the tale forward. The ungrateful son. Once long ago, there lived a man with his wife in a quiet village. Their house was small, but it stood sturdily at the edge of the road, with a wooden bench by the door where neighbors might pause for talk. One evening, when the sun was sinking behind the hills and the air smelled of hearth smoke, the man and his wife set their table. Upon it lay a roasted chicken, browned and glistening with fat, its scent filling the house with a promise of comfort. They sat opposite one another, knives ready, eager to share the meal. As they bowed their heads to begin, the man lifted his eyes and saw through the doorway a bent figure slowly approaching. It was his father, an old man with weary steps, his back stooped by years of toil. His beard was thin and white, his clothes patched and worn, yet his eyes held a meek light of hope, as if he wished for nothing more than to be welcomed at his son's table. But the son, hard of heart, frowned. He thought to himself, "This chicken is for us, not for him. If he sits and eats, there will be little left for me." And so, with quick hands, he seized the roasted bird and thrust it beneath the bench out of sight. The father entered. He greeted them softly and asked for nothing. The wife, with a troubled look, fetched him a mug of cool water. He drank, gave thanks, and turned away, leaving the house as quietly as he had come. Then the son, satisfied that the old man was gone, reached beneath the bench to bring forth the chicken once more. But when his fingers touched it, a chill ran through him. He pulled it up, and lo, it was no longer the roasted bird. In his hands writhed a monstrous toad as large as a platter, its skin dark and wet, its eyes gleaming like poisoned jewels. With a sudden leap, it sprang upon his face, clinging there as though it were part of him. The man shrieked and clawed at it. But whoever tried to seize the toad found themselves frozen in terror. For the creature would glare with such venom, its bulging eyes aflame with malice, that no one dared touch it. His wife, trembling, tried once and drew back in horror. Neighbors came and recoiled the same. None could tear it away. From that hour, the son bore the toad upon his face wherever he went. It clung to him night and day, never loosening its hold. If he starved it, it fastened its wide mouth upon his cheek and drew nourishment from his very flesh. Thus he was forced each morning to set food before it, feeding the creature as if it were a master, and he its servant. The toad swelled and grew its belly heavy, its eyes ever hungrier, until his days were filled with dread. So he wandered through the world, marked by his sin, finding no rest in any village or town. Children fled from him. Dogs barked at his passing. And when folk asked what curse had befallen him, he lowered his eyes, for he knew it was the judgment of heaven upon an ungrateful son who denied bread to his father. Thus he roamed until the end of his days, with the toad upon his face, a living reminder that those who turn their hearts from the old and the weak shall find no peace, neither at table nor in the world beyond.